So I called the guy. And with my legendary mercy gifts, I told him he was probably right on all three of those things. Terrible leader, terrible pastor, terrible Christian. Kidding. I said, listen, my friend, first thing, if you lead long enough, you're going to experience all three of these realities. If internal circumstances don't bring you to all three of these, external circumstances eventually will. And then I congratulated him. I said, I don't care what it took for you to finally get to the point where you circled that downturned arrow. But now that you're clear on it, just declare code red and start some meetings. You will lead your church out of it once you have the courage to define your reality. A woman executive of an NGO emailed me after this session. She couldn't summon the courage to circle the particular arrow that her organization was in. So she called a staff meeting right after our day together. She drew these three arrows on a flip chart. She probably butchered them. And then she asked her top leaders which current reality they thought they were in. And they all burst out laughing at once. They said, are you kidding me? We have been plateaued for 3 years. You had to listen to Hybels for 3 hours to realize that? Now guess what? Here's the payoff. You ready? Leaders, your whole team knows what reality your organization is in. They all know. They're waiting for you to work up the courage to admit it to yourself and to step up and lead them out of it. But they know. I could go on and tell you interesting and humorous responses to these three arrows, but let's see how courageous you all are right now. Whatever you're most responsible for leading these days, be it a department, a division, a team, a church, a business, an NGO, whatever you're leading right now, what's your current reality? If you need a courage booster before you do this, say to Joshua Prayer, be strong and courageous, do not be afraid, God will be with you, He will not forsake you. And then circle that arrow. Circle it. And then as soon as you possibly can, go to your team and say, did I circle the right one? Are we seeing this all together? And then you can decide if it's time for a code red or to create urgency or to pour increasing amounts of fuel on a nicely burning fire. But once you're crystal clear on this, God will guide your next leadership steps, but it begins with the ruthless courage and honesty about your current reality. Yes? Got it? Okay. The third component of leadership, one that requires way more courage than first meets the eye, is the courage to build a fantastic culture. The courage to build a fantastic, healthy, flourishing, God-honoring culture. And if you're expecting to hear some soft-sided HR psycho-babble for the next few moments, you're in for a rude awakening. Because nothing I put my hand to doing at Willow the last 6 years has required more old-fashioned courage and fortitude than moving our staff culture toward a healthier place. Nothing. In fact, the first step in the process created so much fear in me that I postponed authorizing it for almost a full year. How's that? I vibrated with fear for a full year before I took the first important step. You're wondering what that step was? It was bringing in an outside firm to measure the actual health of our culture at that time. Again, why did I wait so long? Because I was cowardly. There you have it. I was cowardly about it. Why else? I knew our results were going to be ugly. When I came back into my operational leadership role here at Willow 6 years ago, we had just watched 3 senior leaders leave. There was confusion in the air, there were muffled conversations in the hallways, there were tears by the water cooler, and burnout marks in the parking lot. And I knew this was all going to show up if we had staff fill out an anonymous staff engagement survey. This was going to hurt like going to a dentist hurts. This was going to hurt like a root canal with no painkillers. I was not excited about it. But I also knew it was the right thing to do, mainly because our new HR director told me it was the right thing to do every single day. for about a year. It just wore me down. So I had to start praying the Joshua prayer every morning. Be strong and courageous. Don't give in to fear. God will never leave you or forsake you. So finally I summoned the courage to authorize the survey, and the results came back every bit as ugly and painful as I imagined. It was pain on a stick. It was awful. The tool we used and still use is called the Best Christian Workplace, and it's based on a 5-point scoring system. Now here's what let me interpret it real quick. If you score between 3.75 or lower than that, you're in a toxic culture. People don't trust each other. A lot of people don't even like each other. There's unresolved conflict. There's hurt feelings. Just think of this as bad karma, okay? It's a place you don't want to work, really. And then this next, if you get up in the 4.0 range, that's healthy, that's comfortable, that's nice. If people sort of like going to work, it's not all that exciting though. It's sort of like kissing your sister. Think about it. Now, when you get up here, this is where you flourish. And up in this range, that's where the magic and the power lie, up in this flourishing range. Okay, so we hired that firm, they came in, and our first year, our score was 3.82. And that's after I had to fill out 27 bogus surveys to get us that. Not true. But when I went over with our HR director the truth of this and realized that we were just above the toxic level, it was devastating to me. I stayed up late almost every night for a week reading hundreds of individual comments from our staff. Some of them were very positive and hopeful, but way too many were filled with hurt and disappointment. My emotions were all over the map. My emotions went from deep sadness to fantasies about firing everybody and starting over, to fantasies about firing myself and leaving the mess to someone else. In rugby, that would be called a hospital pass. So over the course of the next several weeks, our executive team had to pray the Joshua prayer, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. God is with you. He will never forsake you. And we processed the results, and we began to put action plans together to remedy this situation. And with God's help, we were determined to do whatever was required to move our staff toward higher levels of health. We knew there was no one silver bullet that was going to magically move our culture to where we wanted it to be. We were going to have to hold literally hundreds of meetings while we're still flying the little plane, by the way, to get folks to talk and to make apologies to one another and to slowly build new trust levels. So we rolled up our sleeves and we went to work. We took the same survey 1 year later, and we made a little progress, and we went up to that 395 level. And I only had to send a dozen surveys in that year, so we were getting better. Encouraged by that progress, we kept working, we kept meeting, we kept praying, and we kept talking and apologizing and talking and building trust. And by the third year, we had finally broken into that healthy level. And you could tell it around the church. You could tell it in the hallways and around the water coolers. The bounce and the step of staff members was coming back. And along the way, we were learning some really important stuff. If you haven't written a quote down yet, get your pen out. This one you'll want to write down. I have it printed on the inside of my eyeballs these days. People join organizations, they leave managers. People join organizations, they leave managers. Now, most of you probably knew this. We started taking exit interviews very seriously, and person after person said, we are crazy about Willow. We're crazy about Willow's mission and vision. We love this church. I wanted to stay and pursue that mission, but my manager was crazy. And by crazy, they meant controlling, or unattentive, or uninspiring, demanding, uncaring, or worse yet, mean-spirited. We got that info, and we started a series of managers training courses. We made huge progress there. We also had to change out some managers because they had become black learners. They were done trying to grow as people managers, so they lost their opportunities to lead people on our staff. We also modified our performance evaluations to make it crystal clear to every staff member that we are every bit as concerned about building our staff culture as we are building the church. And these days, staff are measured every 6 months, not only by what they achieved, but by how they achieved it, which means did they display Christ-like attitudes? Did they inspire teammates? Did they resolve conflict quickly and biblically? Did they communicate to others in a timely and uplifting fashion? The following year, we hit a 4.25. And I'm telling you, that was cause for great celebration. It meant we were in the rarefied air of elite organizations with flourishing, life-giving cultures, and we learned those are few and far between. And then, just a few months ago, we took our most recent survey, and we scored a 4.33. Now, gang, our consultant told us not to get used to scores that high. He said that's almost an anomaly, it's so high. And he said that's going to be hard to repeat because staff cultures are made up of imperfect human beings. Ours is, because I'm in it. But he is elated with our progress. And now, just take one last look at this graph, and I want to give you the payoff of what I'm really driving at here. A few observations about this graph. The first one is going to wreck the day of every senior pastor and CEO gathered here all around the world. Ready for your day to be wrecked? In the first meeting with our culture consultant, the guy looked at me square in the eye and he asked me whose job it was to drive the improvements that we wanted to see in our culture. There were only two of us sitting on the other side of the table from him, myself and the HR director, and just as I was going to motion to the HR guy, the consultant says, and don't be tempted to point your finger at him, because for this to work, you're going to have to drive this bill. So I put that back in my holster, and if I've learned anything the last 5 or 6 years, it's this. Staff cultures will only ever be as healthy as the CEO or senior pastor wants them to be.